Hi everyone, Larry Swatchwell here. Welcome back to the shop. Today we're in the shop. I bet you thought this was going to be another birdhouse. It's not. I'm not finished with birdhouses yet, but today I'm going to be working on a display case for some of the trophies I won when I was a Highland Games athlete. It might be silly to keep these trophies, but at my age, that's all I have are memories of those games. And I loved the Highland Games. If you're not familiar with them, you can go to my Highland Games playlist and see all the events right there, and including a Highland Games instructional video. All but one of the trophies I ever won have been hidden in closets. The trophy that we have on display is the Doer's Hammer. This was a magnificent trophy. Doers had a contest for 2 years in a row. And at the end of each year, if you won one of the 10 hammers they had at different games around the country, you were invited to Texas to the championship. Well, unfortunately, when we got to Texas, Texas had one of those deluge rains and we never got to compete. But I was fortunate enough to win 2 of them. I gave one of them away to my friend Tommy Carmichael, who was kind of retiring at that time. But he saw that Doer's Hammer and came out of retirement, and lo and behold, he didn't win his own. But do you think he gave me mine back? No, he didn't. So Tommy, I wouldn't mind having that back. Anyway, we did the closet makeover, and I have some plywood left over from it, and my son-in-law is in construction and gave me a leftover glass door. So I'm going to put those 2 scraps together into a shallow display case, and this display case could be used to house tools or anything else, memorabilia you might have around the house, and it'll keep the dust off. I'm going to put this display case in my exercise room where I can enjoy those memories again and again every time I work out. Let's get started. I want a 1/4 inch overlay on each side, so this is pretty straightforward on how long the top and the bottom is going to be. Simply mark a 1/2 inch on one side, and it is 39 9/16. So to construct this box, I'm going to be using the leftover plywood, and I want this to be the inside. So now I have to determine how tall this should be. To determine that, you might just think I'd take 3/4 of an inch from the top and the bottom off, and the 1/2 inch for the 1/4 inch overlay. But 3/4 inch plywood is not 3/4 inch plywood these days. So I'm using scraps that I have left over from the closet build. So I've got the top and the bottom represented here. Now I need the 1/2 inch to represent a 1/4 inch overlay from the top and the bottom. Square it off, which is 13 9/16. So I want a top, a shelf, and a bottom out of this board. The easiest way to divide that is to get a number divisible by 3, since I want 3. I'm going to choose 18 here and put that corner there and that corner there. So I know I want 6 and 12 because I want to utilize as much of this plywood as I can. And that gives me almost 5 inches. It looks like 5 1/16, but I want to split this line because I'm going to have kerf on this side and that side. So when I set this up at the table saw, I will set it to the middle of this line. So another big mistake. I got in a rush and I should have cut that plywood to length when it was still solid. So now I have to go to the trouble of lining these ends up or setting up a stop block, and in my situation it's just easier to line this up and then make one cut. Not wanting to make the same mistake twice, at least in the same day, I'm going to go ahead and cut this to length. These are the 2 ends Table saw still set up to the correct width. Cut it here, take it over to the table saw. So as I glue and screw this together, the glue's not going to stick to the painted area, so I've gone ahead and sanded that. So I'm ready for some assembly. No glue in this joint. I've got it squared up with my homemade right angle. I'm going to be using these Specs screws, and as you can see, they don't have any thread here at the end, and that's about 3/4 of an inch into there, especially when I countersink it, as opposed to drywall screws that have thread all the way up. If I were to use a drywall screw, these threads would prevent this board from being pulled in to the joint. I'm going to pre-drill everything because plywood really loves to split. I've got my depth gauge set, so this screw is going to go a little bit further, but I also want to add some wood putty because this is going to be a painted project, so I've set the depth of the stop here a little bit deep. Alright, I'm going to put 3 screws in each side. I've lowered this screw. This is the back we're looking at. I've lowered that screw because I want to put a dado in here for the back. Be a 1/4 inch Luan piece of plywood. I have it caught here between a bench dog and my vise, and have tweaked it so that it is now square. I'm going to leave it in here to dry, and then we'll come back and put the back on. While the glue is drying, I set up my router. I put on this auxiliary base. It goes all the way across here. When you're routing on a small edge like this, the router tends to tip and bend. That's going to prevent that from doing that. I have a rabbiting bit in there that's going to cut in 3/8 of an inch, and I've got it cut just a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch for the Luan. I've just enough time to glue this back on before I go to a track meet. This cheap plywood, the bottom piece here has a bit of a bow to it, and this plywood will help close that gap. Been busy today. Just got around to this late afternoon. Been fiddling around with this solid stock that I'm going to put in front of the plywood here. It's 3/4 of an inch wide, about 5/8 of an inch tall. It was all in my scrap bin, and it's a couple pieces of pine and a piece of poplar. It's all going to be painted, so it doesn't matter. Not there yet. That's it. The hinges I had originally planned on using on this they're not going to work, so I've got to change the plan a little bit. Got these 2 hinges that will work. And what I need to do is to mortise them. This is a old Black & Decker. I like it though because it has a really nice adjustment feature here. And I've got it set so it's just even with this hinge. I put an auxiliary board on here to give me some space, and now I'm going to rough out this hinge. And now I'll just clean it up. That's a nice flush fit. Okay, I've pressed it down really hard. Got it. I have this center finding bit in here. I don't actually want to drill a hole in here because this bit is bigger than the screw I'm going to be using, but I do want to find the center of the hinge. And that's all it takes. Well, I'm really pleased with the fit of this. Put it in the middle drawer, and now that I have these screws established of where those hinges go, it'll be so much easier for reassembly. So I'm going to take the door off. Now I can put that middle shelf in and add some putty to these holes that need to be covered up. I'm going to use these D-rings to hang this up with. This really could use a French cleat, but it's not that heavy. I've shimmed this up to make it even with 2 pieces of hotel keys. I'm hanging this on a concrete wall, and instead of measuring everything, I'm just going to put a little mark here where it needs to be. I'm ready to reattach the door frame, and this is MDF, and I'm going to put a little dab of medium density super glue here. I'm not expecting this to hold the hinges on, but I do think it adds strength to the holes that are already there.